What's going on, everyone? It's your boy, Reyes Gallegos. Right now, you're listening to the That's Textbook Sports podcast. Appreciate every single one of y'all who listened to my podcast. Follow one of my followers on social media. I appreciate all of y'all. Means a lot to me. Once again, make sure you check out the description because the links to my social media will be in there. Subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, turn on the post notifications. You don't want to miss any of the content that I've got coming up, especially as we grind towards draft season. Going to be doing a lot of prospect profiles, film breakdowns, finding out which prospects are rising up in the rankings, which prospects I have in terms of my overall rankings. You don't want to miss any of the content we've got coming up. Plus, we're going to be talking about playoff football later on. So even though the season is winding down and we're just at a couple numbered games left, there's still a lot of content to talk about as it pertains to football, basketball, and all sports that are going on right now. Appreciate all of y'all. Make sure you stick around. You don't want to miss out on the last segment of this podcast. Sit back, relax, enjoy. You don't want to miss it. And of course, as y'all know, before I start this podcast, how I get my intro going, that's textbook. So let's just dive into it right now. Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl rematch, right? Kind of a sloppy game to start with. Philadelphia Eagles, well, I should say that the Kansas City Chiefs, in the trenches, for their offensive line and their defensive line, they really dominated this football game. I came away looking at this football game, like I think each team comes away with, or after looking at this game, the Chiefs say, we need more help at wide receiver. Obviously, they lead the league in drop passes. And on paper, they don't have much. Then you look at onto the field, tons of drop passes. You can't be a team that's a Super Bowl contender, having Patrick Mahomes, and the defense being the best it's been in the Mahomes era, and also dropping passes. And then for the Philadelphia Eagles, of course, they're 9-1. They have sole control over the NFC East, and not only just the NFC East, but the NFC in general. You still feel like, okay, the Philadelphia Eagles won, but it's still not their best performance. And even Devontae Smith said that in the post-game interview with Scott Van Pelt. This isn't their best game in terms of execution, running the football. They were able to run the football a lot better this game. It was a lot better compared to the past couple of weeks. DeAndre Swift is taking over this backfield. He's becoming the RB1. Jason Kelce is the best center I have ever seen. That is not a joke. That literally, he's the best center I've ever seen. And you still feel like he has more to offer. Like, this might be his last season, or it's dwindling down soon. But with the way he's playing, one of the most smartest centers in the history of the NFL and the best first ballot Hall of Famer right now. Now, I'll talk about the other Kelce brother because he's had a down season. When they're showing those individual cut-ups on the Monday Night Football broadcast, he just doesn't have the same suddenness. Maybe he's dealing with some kind of injury. I think earlier in the season he was dealing with a lower body injury. I think it was to his hip or knee, ankle. Maybe that's hindering him down because he just doesn't have that same suddenness. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles in this game, they triple-teamed him. They double-teamed him, right? When you watch the Kansas City Chiefs, you say, even last year when they had Juju Smith-Schuster, he's doesn't move the needle, but he at least helped them, and you can see the impact he had with this football team. When you watch them on paper, you say, okay, well, if you take away Kelce, then what's their next option? They don't, and quite frankly, they don't really have a next option. In week 1, Kadarius Toney is dropping passes. Now, Justin Watson is dropping passes. Marquez Valdez-Scantling had a wide open touchdown he should have caught. Dropped pass. Who else are they going to find? And I thought it was pretty ignorant of them to not make any move at the trade deadline. I don't think it's going to go to this type of statue or this type of area, but they better not expect Mahomes to do to make miracles with not much. He's got to have some kind of other significant contribution, or Kelsey's just going to have to step up. Now, here's another thing, less serious take about Kelsey in terms of football, schemes, routes, suddenness. Whenever a professional athlete dates a celebrity, for some reason that professional athlete's game just dips down. Now, maybe it's the media, publicity, or whatever it is, but it seems to happen. So, is Travis Kelce starting or having a Taylor Swift curse? Who knows? But overall, looking at this game, well played for the Philadelphia Eagles. They were finally able to get the run game going. Passing game wasn't as terrific. Everyone else outside of Devontae Smith didn't have a fantastic game. I think looking back on the stats, A.J. Brown had a catch for 8 yards or something like that. I don't know completely his stats. I'll have to look it up here, what he had last night. But you look, yeah, it was 1 catch, 8 yards. Obviously, they had him and Jalen Hurts had that miscommunication, which led to the Hurts interception. For the Philadelphia Eagles, lots to be proud of and lots to be not so proud of. Like, their secondary played a lot better of a game, still struggled with a couple flat routes. It's a whole different story, obviously, if Marquez Valdes-Scantling catches that ball. And look at it for Bradley Roby. I mean, in the whole secondary in general, they play with their feet in the mud. Their feet are really stuck. They let the receivers get to their toes, and once a receiver gets to your toes, that's it. Once a receiver is able to climb up on you and get only a couple yards away, now they're with that. They're going on a post. They're going to be able to beat you deep if you're not playing with suddenness on your feet as a defensive back. Those are my takeaways from the game. Of course, let me know what you thought. If you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, are you panicking with the type of weapons Mahomes has? Or is there still something to be proud of, something that they can look forward to? If you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, it's not been the most prettiest, but that's also, while it may be a curse, it's also a blessing. So let me know what y'all think in the comments. I appreciate your participation. Now, we got the college football playoff initial rankings, or not the initial rankings. The rankings are going to come out. The initial rankings, way past that. But they're still going to stay the same. Now, more significant, prayers to Jordan Travis. The FSU quarterback had that horrific leg injury. Now his college football season's not only over, but his college football career's over. Prayers for Jordan Travis. We hope you get well. And for the Florida State football team, it was like, how did they respond? Like, if you're a player or you're a fan for Florida State and you see Jordan Travis go down in that type of fashion, and you know what types of goals you have for your season, not just on the ACC, but an even bigger picture, that had to feel deflating. But they still, and I know it was North Alabama or some school, they obviously took care of business. But how does the committee rank Florida State going on now? A lot of people are arguing that we shouldn't judge a team because they missed their starting quarterback. I'd like to take this back to when Alabama, with, I think it was the 2019 season, and Tua Tagovailoa, he got hurt. Now, because then they had already lost the game. They lost to LSU. If they were to have lost another, obviously no two-loss team has made the college football playoff in the history. Then the committee ranks them differently. So how is the Florida State going to be ranked and viewed by the committee? Are they going to be the best team? And I'll just say this. Before the Jordan Travis injury, I didn't know, and I was really skeptical if the committee was going to keep them there at 4. Because if Washington wins out and they beat Oregon in the Pac-12 championship, Washington's going to be undefeated. Now you're comparing, and this is where we get into the nitty-gritty details, the real grimy details. We're comparing a team who doesn't have their starting quarterback, should have some kind of consideration. Do we penalize them for that? I don't think so. But you have to consider it. And then you're looking at a Washington team that beat Oregon twice. Now they're Pac-12 champions. They're undefeated. Their win against Arizona, which wasn't good at the time, but now Arizona's ranked, is looking really good. Their win against Utah is kind of up and down. Are we going to put Washington ahead of Florida State? And then I also have to think about it with this too. Alabama's only got one loss. Now, Alabama and Georgia for that December 2nd game are going to meet up in the SEC Championship in Atlanta. If Alabama beats Georgia, and we know how highly Georgia is valued by just about everyone, not even the media, fans in general. Back-to-back defending national champions. No national championship team, no college football team has won the national championship 3 times in a row. So we see, and we're talking about the Georgia defense, we just see the overall, not love, but we can see what Georgia is. So if Alabama beats Georgia, and now Alabama's only got one loss, now we have to consider FSU and who they've played so far in the ACC. Now, some of their wins that they had before the season are not looking so good now, and that's the crazy thing about the college football playoff. And when we talk about these rankings, is a win that looked good now isn't going to look good, or maybe it does afterwards. Alabama beats Georgia. We're going to have a lot of serious conversations and talk. So once again, my audience, I want you all to join in into this podcast too. Chime in, chip in, put your 2 cents, $5, 100 bills. If Alabama beats Georgia, do they get in over FSU? And let's talk about if Washington beats Oregon, that'll be twice that they beat them. Obviously going to be significant in the committee's eyes. Undefeated, Pac-12 champ. Does Washington get ahead of Florida State? And let's just assume in both of those scenarios that Florida State wins out and they win the ACC. Let me know in the comments what y'all think. I appreciate it. Alright, so let's talk about it. Each team's path to the college football playoff, because I think now we can kind of narrow it down. Like on the outside looking in, we got Louisville. They've got only one loss. Remember, they beat Notre Dame. Match up against FSU. So let's just start at number 1, because we assume number 1 obviously is going to be Georgia until after this weekend with the game, which I cannot wait to talk about. Georgia obviously beat Georgia Tech, easy. Gonna have to beat Alabama. And if they do lose against Georgia, that'll be 2 one-loss SEC teams. And I hate to say SEC favoritism from the committee, but sometimes it just does happen that way. And we see it with some teams like Ole Miss and all of that. And Auburn, who I'll also be talking about because they lost to New Mexico State. No discredit to Mexico State, but obviously it's New Mexico State, right? Georgia win out now. If they do lose, it's a whole lot of other scenarios where we're talking about chances and we're getting into that, there's that meme with that show Sunny in Philadelphia, Sunnyside in Philadelphia or something like that. And he's just coming up with all these solutions with this red string talking about possible scenarios. That's what happens if Georgia loses and Alabama wins. That's Georgia's path. You got to win out. If you lose, and let's just say it's a close game, I still think they get in because you're obviously going to have one of the teams from the Big Ten, someone from the SEC, then someone from the Pac-12. Now, Florida State winning, now you're having to make Georgia or Florida State. I think the committee probably goes with Georgia. And then, of course, Texas. But for Texas, it feels like a long, high road, even though they are ahead of Alabama. But Alabama beating Georgia is obviously significant because now you're not only debating Alabama and the other teams I talk about making it, but now you're debating Alabama and Texas, who Texas beat. And then for the Big Ten teams. For the Big Ten teams, it's really simple, and it's probably the most simple in the college football for all the other remaining teams. For one of the Big Ten teams, Ohio State or Michigan, you're going to have to beat your rival, your hated rival, in the game, and of course, win the Big Ten championship. Now, that game against Iowa, I think, is pretty scary because Iowa Yeah, their offense is back from the 1900s. It's old school. They didn't not even wearing helmets type of football. Those leather helmets, the things that they called helmets that they put on their head. That's Iowa's brand of football. But their defense is fantastic and they play tough. So, Big Ten teams, beat your rival, win the Big Ten, and then for FSU is you really have to win now, and I think they're gonna have this type of Ohio State run when they had it in 2015 and they secured the first championship in the college football playoff era, which is the backup is gonna have to play terrific, and not only the backup playing terrific, but the team is just gonna have to wipe everyone out from here on. Like they're gonna have a 59-0 statement game to show the committee that, hey, you know what? Our starter got out, but our backup can be just as good, maybe if not even better. Alabama, of course, we know the scenario. Pac-12 teams, it's win and get in. I mean, it all points to conference championship for the Pac-12 teams and some of these other teams as well. Oregon wins, they get in. Washington wins, they get in. I don't know much of a. I mean, obviously, if Oregon loses, that's 2 losses for them. We know the history with that. They wouldn't make it. If Washington were to lose, it's hard for me. Now you're debating Washington, Texas, Alabama, maybe even Florida State. And then looking at it for Texas, who I think it feels like, in my opinion, I think with them being ranked ahead of Alabama, that's great. But obviously the key thing, and I hate to talk about it this much and sound so redundant, but Alabama being Georgia, that sounds significant. Now maybe Texas, if that does happen, Texas goes ahead of Georgia, but it's hard for me with the injuries Texas has, and it's hard for me to see the committee do that. Because at this time of year, the committee, they take away from their consistency. Like, it'll be consistent for the first 3 rankings, and then for the final couple, it's absolute chaos. Texas obviously went out, gonna hope one of Florida State, Alabama slips up in the conference championship or sometime soon. And that's what I see happening for these remaining teams in the college football playoff. And another question for my audience. Right now, if you had to bet, if you were a betting person, who are you betting to win the national championship? Let me know in the comments what y'all think. It is finally here. It's the Ohio State University going into the big house for the game. Probably, nope, actually, check that, scratch that. The most toxic game or sporting event in history is going to go down Saturday at noon. For Ohio State, they controlled this rivalry for a decade, absolutely demolishing Michigan. Now, in the past couple of years, since 2021, Michigan got right back. They took the jabs, they took the punches, they took the uppercuts. Now they struck back. They landed a couple of their own, winning back-to-back Big Ten championships, going to the college football playoff last year, beating Ohio State 2 times in a row, which, mind you, hadn't happened in a decade. Now the allegations with Michigan, the Connor Stallions allegations, Michigan fans, the Michigan side, saying free Harbaugh when this team actually, mind you, accepted the 3-game punishment, scouting future teams' opponents, sign stealing, videotaping it, saying Ohio State and Ryan Day incited this, that's why now they're in trouble, and having to deal with the hard questions. It all boils down to the game Saturday at noon. This game holds all the narratives, and it could change all the narratives. Michigan fought back. Ohio State, you controlled this rivalry for a decade. Now Michigan comes back, but it happens during a time when they were caught cheating. or when they were cheating, supposedly and allegedly. Can Ohio State rewrite those narratives about them being soft and get back at Michigan? Or will Michigan have the ultimate Uno reverse card, trump card, whatever you want to call it, and beat Ohio State in Ann Arbor? Like I said, y'all, this game has all the narratives. It could change all the narratives and rewrite every single narrative about what happened on in the past couple of years. Ohio State can get back and say, oh, it was only because you cheated. Or Michigan could have the ultimate Uno reverse card, trump card, whatever you want to call it, and say, you know what? Yeah, we cheated. But even when we got caught doing it, and even right now, you guys still can't beat us. This game, obviously, I mean, it might, like I said, it might be the most toxic. We already know these two teams, fan bases, absolutely hate each other's guts. I mean, the Ohio State University, during that week, they don't even use the letter M. They cross it out every single time. No blue is allowed in the facility. And the same thing goes for Michigan. They cross out O's. No red or scarlet is allowed in the facilities. So we see these teams already hate each other. There's a reason why it's called the game. Now let's talk about the schemes and the matchup. I don't doubt Michigan coming in with a little bit of arrogance into this game because they've seen that the past couple of years they've just beat Ohio State in the trenches and specifically in the run game. That's what their game plan is going to be. I really don't see them changing much in terms of a game plan. What they're going to attack is going to be have J.J. McCarthy game manage, maybe sometimes like last year, do a couple of trick plays in there where you catch them on a play action and their front is just trying in dire need to stop the run and loading up in the box and having JJ make a couple of throws. Maybe they do that from time to time. But for Ohio State, I found it interesting when Ryan Day said in his post-game interview with one of the sideline reporters for the Big Ten Network is that they found their identity. Because when you look at this Ohio State football team, yeah, they have all the weapons in the world. Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously speaks for itself. Then Emeka Egbuka and their history with wide receivers and their track record all speak for themselves. But right now, they're a team that's about running the football too. It's not going to be a high-scoring game. This game may finish 17-10 or 16-10, whatever. The point is not going to be a high-scoring game because both of these offenses operate first offensively within the run game. For Ohio State in their run game, it's TreVeyon Henderson. TreVeyon Henderson just may be. Now, when I talk about this, a lot of Buckeye fans might have some serious flashbacks because TreVeyon Henderson just might be hitting his 2015 Ezekiel Elliott stride. You got to remember, for the Buckeyes then, remember they lost their starting quarterback, but Ezekiel Elliott, late in the season, really took off. 4 touchdowns in the national championship game. Of course, in the semifinal game, 85 yards through the heart of the South to advance them to the national championship. TreVeyon Henderson just might be hitting his Ezekiel Elliott stride. If you look at his performances, and especially his stats in the last couple of games, let's just take a look at it. And it is 162 rushing yards and 1 touchdown on 24 carries against Wisconsin. Against Rutgers, 22 carries, 128 yards, 1 rushing touchdown. And then recently against Minnesota, 15 carries, 146 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, a 9.7 average. He just might be hitting that Ezekiel Elliott stride, and it's something for not only Michigan, but the rest of the country to watch out for. And also, obviously, for the Ohio State Buckeyes, they have arguably the best player in college football. Both of these teams are really equal. Like, okay, good defense. Both teams you can say about that. Good run game. Obviously, both teams you can say about that. But the one X factor for me, and I don't think he really should be considered an X factor, but he moves the needle, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr. That's what the Buckeyes have that Michigan doesn't, is receiving firepower. Now, this has been the case for the last couple of years. There might be snow in Ann Arbor. Both teams, obviously good running football teams, will rely on that. But it's about manufacturing touches for Marvin Harrison Jr. that go beyond or past the line of scrimmage and go beyond, okay, deep ball, deep ball. Because with the weather and those elements are going to have a factor if it does snow in Ann Arbor. But it's finding ways, how can we use him outside of getting him on a go route? How can we find him behind the line of scrimmage with sweep tosses and all of that? And I saw them do it a little bit in this Minnesota game, or the Minnesota game, with Emeka Egbuka. Lots of easy extensions of the run for Emeka Egbuka, using him and allowing him to use his yard after catch ability and his special teams ability, which he showed as a freshman. Can they do that for Marvin Harrison Jr.? And what, like I say with motion, a lot of the best offenses, not only just in college football, but even in the NFL, they use motion a lot for matchups, to create confusion and numbers, and to clear space. How are the Ohio State Buckeyes going to do that for Marvin Harrison Jr.? A prediction in this game, I just don't think the Buckeyes' rush defense is at a point where it really needs to be. Like, they're a good rushing football team, I had mentioned. But up against Michigan, how good is that going to be? Because the one thing that Ohio State has in their favor is that their game against Notre Dame. And we look at the carries for Trevion Henderson in that game, 14, 104, and 1 on a 7.4 average. That's going to be closest in terms of physicality for the Buckeyes. That's going to be, that Notre Dame game is as close as Michigan. So they've handled it once, and they squeaked by. I mean, if Notre Dame had that extra defender where it was needed to be, Ohio State most likely doesn't win that game. Or who knows what goes on from there. But that Notre Dame game helps out Ohio State because it's like a pre-test for the final exam, or like a study sheet for the final exam. So let me know what y'all think in this matchup. I'll be talking a lot more about the game. It's an interesting rivalry. It's an interesting matchup, of course. Lots of history and tradition go into this, which is, I think, just adds more to the significance and the impact of it. Be talking a lot more about that. And let me know who you think wins this football game. Because they're pretty, on paper that is, really even teams. Who wins this game and advances to the Big Ten Championship to play Iowa? Let me know in the comments. What is going on with the LA Chargers and Justin Herbert? Justin Herbert isn't the one to blame. I mean, he really isn't. You see, the defense is allowing an absurd number of yards, points, putting Herbert in this offense in situations where he's got to be superhuman. Now, is it not, like, are we excluding Justin Herbert from any criticism? Absolutely not. He's got to be better, of course, but it's hard to be better when your first-round draft pick at wide receiver is running like a fullback and can't catch the pass that goes right into their hands. And then it's also hard when Austin Eckler just doesn't look like he has that same acceleration that he used to have. Like, we all, in that clip where he breaks away and he's going down the sideline and they're able to chase him down fairly quickly, he just doesn't seem like he has the same burst, and it's been a less than productive year for him. Now, of course, dealing with injuries, but you also have to evaluate too and take into consider that running back at his age, this is when the decline starts to go. And then, of course, obviously with this team, they had tons of injuries. Joey Bosa, prayers out for him. Prayers out for Mike Williams. He's also injured and out. He was injured earlier in the season. I think at some point in time, looking at this overall roster, they have struggles issues with the run game on the offensive line, and at times with pass protection. Is the pass rush getting there? Who do they have as a defensive tackle, a 3-tech, someone inside to stop the run on that defensive line? Asante Samuel is a nice, talented cornerback. Same goes with Derwin James, but they've already got Herbert onto that extension, right? The gold mine for a general manager is you get the young franchise quarterback and you're able to load up financial portions to the areas or holes of this football team. That's the perfect, absolute gold mine right there. Well, now for the LA Chargers, they're paying their quarterback, because before you could be able to use financials, other words, instead of that quarterback who's on their cheap rookie deal. Well, now for the Chargers, they've got Justin Herbert, and it's not the rookie deal anymore. He's on an extension. But I don't feel like this is a team that has all enough. Like maybe, and then at some point in time, we have to consider with the LA Chargers, and not even going back to the LA Chargers. Let's go way back to the San Diego Chargers when they were in San Diego, to the history of the Chargers in general, and say that, well, maybe this is just a team that's cursed. Because Murphy's Law exists with the Chargers. It really does. For any way it can go wrong, it possibly goes wrong, and then some. Keenan Allen, he's having a phenomenal year. He did have a couple of drop passes. I'm not putting that against him. A lot of receivers do have drop passes. We know what Keenan Allen's history is. He's a really good wide receiver, reliable as well. But he's also getting older too. And you wonder how long he can keep this type of production up at his age. I'm not panicking full outright on the Chargers, but I look at this overall team and their roster, and I figure, well, I don't think they can compete with a team like the Chiefs. And then I don't think they can compete with a team like the Ravens. If the Browns, Deshaun Watson gets back to healthy again, or he gets playing like how he used to in Houston, right? And then you consider the Texans with Stroud, and all the Cincinnati Bengals, all these other playoff Bills, all these other playoff caliber teams that we value highly. Can that Chargers team and roster compete with these other ones? I don't really think so. So, what is the future moving forward for the Chargers? I'd hate to be that Debbie Downer that says it's looking bleak, all of that sort of thing, because I do think they have some nice pieces, but I also think that the pieces that they had when Justin Herbert was a rookie, also too, they're aging, and it's not the same as to when he had his phenomenal rookie season and he was a younger quarterback. It's not the same, and you have to have conversations about the future of this team and competing for championships, because they have Justin Herbert, franchise quarterback. Lots of other teams, with the exception of just a couple, would take him on their roster. You have that franchise guy, you keep him, right? But what else do they have outside of that to really help him? And then I'll talk about Brandon Staley, because obviously he's had, with the roster that they've had in previous years, it's been down. And he's supposed to be a defensive-minded head coach. They're supposed to figure these things out defensively, be able to spend offensively, and he can work with less in some capacity on defense. That hasn't happened. His defense has given up chunk play after chunk play. J.C. Jackson in free agency, that was a bad signing, because he's no longer with the team anymore. And you have to figure, of course, it's not just Brandon Staley, although he does need to take not majority of the credit, but a huge portion of the blame. Not credit, blame. And a little bit of Herbert, but what else with this roster says that they can compete for a championship? Let me know what y'all think in the comment section. Maybe I'm wrong for feeling this sort of type of way about the LA Chargers. Let me know in the comment section if I am. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your support in this podcast. And once again, don't forget to follow me on social media. The links will be in the description. Subscribe to this podcast, like this video or podcast. And be a friend, tell a friend, please. It's the time of Thanksgiving. Share this podcast out with others. It's the holidays, giving season. I appreciate y'all from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Zach Wilson, New York Jets quarterback, he's now being benched. The Jets are going to the backup, Boyle. It was about time, and with the way Zach Wilson's been playing in his whole career, and as of late, you figured that at some point in time this was going to happen. Obviously, he's got till a rookie contract, and then he won't be with the team anymore. But like I said, it felt like with the Jets, they needed this bridge quarterback that, even though I don't consider QB wins a stat, with the backups you kind of have to consider it, especially with the bridge quarterback that's just trying to keep you afloat until the starter comes back and they're able to be the franchise quarterback that they are. But it felt like a missed opportunity with Aaron Rodgers out for the rest of the year. They already knew. No, you didn't need no football scientist or analytics nerd to tell you that this was going to happen the way it did. Because we all saw it coming. Zach Wilson eventually getting benched. But for the Jets and the rest of their defense, I applaud, and the team as a whole, I applaud them and how Robert Saleh has kept them still motivated for the season to be able to go put their best effort out onto the field. Because when you have Aaron Rodgers and then that happens, of course, on Monday night, then Zach Wilson, who the story was written already in itself that this was going to happen at some point in time, but for them to still give their best effort, kudos to and applause to them and Robert Saleh for keeping them still motivated. But there was a bunch of sightings, reports. Aaron Rodgers, he wants to come back by any time in December or January. And so if that was the case, and if the general manager for the Jets and their staff that makes these kinds of decisions felt that that was going to happen, Aaron Rodgers was going to come back in December or January, why not put their best foot forward and go get someone like Josh Dobbs? Now, of course, does Josh Dobbs move the needle? Am I talking about him in some kind of crazy way? Absolutely not. But Josh Dobbs has shown he can win you a couple of football games and keep you afloat until the starter comes back. That's what I felt like the New York Jets missed, and there was a missed opportunity for them. There's a lot of people that are asking for Robert Saleh's job, saying he's tying himself to Zach Wilson. Is he tying himself to Zach Wilson? I didn't get that. I didn't understand it. I wasn't with him on that. But to say he should lose his job when he's keeping this team still motivated and into the game speaks volumes to what he's done as a coach and his coaching, not resume, but his coaching prowess. My take, or a couple minutes, 2 cents, dollar bills on the New York Jets, what they missed and what we eventually saw coming. So the Pittsburgh Steelers have fired Matt Canada, and a lot of Steelers fans out there are rejoicing. I'll say this about the Pittsburgh Steelers and their offensive woes. Was it solely because Matt Canada? No. Obviously, deserved blame needs to go for Kenny Pickett as well. I don't think it was just one issue that you could really pinpoint for the Steelers offense. It was a multitude of issues. Kenny Pickett not being able to go through a couple reads, his errant throwing, all of that, all those little details about playing quarterback. Kenny Pickett wasn't doing so great. But their inability to get George Pickens and Deontay Johnson, who are two very good weapons for that football team, the ball really speaks a lot of volume, especially with Pickens, because he is that type of wide receiver that is an true area code wide receiver. You put it out anywhere, even to blades of grass by the sideline, he's going to find some way to come down with the football. That's just what he does. So their inability to really work anything with Johnson and have any innovation with their weapons really speaks a lot. It was time. Their new offensive coordinator or interim offensive coordinator to be a shared duty. So we'll see how that goes, and really can't predict too much about what it's going to look like other than see what the product looks like on the field. And now talking about USC football, because it's been an absolute disaster of a season for them. A lot of people expected them to make it to the college football playoffs. Instead, they finished 7-5, and like I said, it's just been an absolute disaster. Now Pine Feinbaum is absolutely going off on Lincoln Riley and saying that a lot of Oklahoma fans were right about him. And this is what Paul Feinbaum had to say. It's a little long, but he says, quote, I don't know if I've seen a worse coaching job by anyone than Lincoln Riley this year. It's a complete disaster, and quite frankly, he ought to pack up. I don't really see what his path is moving forward. Blamed everything on Alex Grinch. They haven't been any better, they've been worse. Well, maybe Lincoln, you ought to look in the mirror. Maybe you're just a total fraud as a coach. Maybe you just lived off of a couple Heisman winners. What Oklahoma did for you, all the people in Oklahoma who were heartbroken 2 years ago, who never thought that they'd get over that blow off, they're over it now. Lincoln Riley is nowhere near the coach that we all collectively tried to make him out to be. Have you ever seen a college season ruined more than what Lincoln Riley did for Caleb Williams? I said this a year ago that I thought it was really a shame that Bryce Young had such a terrible final year. He lost 2 games. I mean, you have a generational cornerback and you finish 7-5. Yeah, and Paul Feinbaum, quite frankly, he wasn't wrong. Lincoln Riley had built a absolute, a really great. Obviously, they didn't win a national championship, but they made a couple of college football playoff experiences, lost to Georgia, and then absolutely got dominated by LSU that year, who didn't. But he's right in all facets, and especially right in the fact saying that you have a generational quarterback like Caleb Williams, and you still only go 7-5. The thing that's been ailing you dating back since to your Oklahoma days has been the defense. At some point, it just follows you. Was Alex Grinch a fantastic defensive coordinator before? No, not really. He wasn't. I thought with Lincoln Riley and USC that this was going to be change USC, because USC in California, like if you name for high school football recruits, the states that have some of the best, Georgia, Florida, Texas, California thrown into there too. So that's a gold mine that he's sitting on. And a lot of California kids, especially, they dream of going to USC. Dream of going to USC. A lot of top recruits there. Lincoln Riley, his offensive system. They should be able to get some recruits, and especially defensive recruits, have top 5 recruiting classes. They did some work in the portal, but the portal is also the same like with NFL free agency. You're mixing in a lot of egos into a locker room, and is it the right time? So that's an area where the portal is great. Yes, you can make immediate jumpstart changes to your program, but the downfall of that is you're bringing a lot of egos into the program, that sort of deal. If you can work past the egos, then you're absolutely fine, and you can be really successful in the transfer portal. When with the transfer portal, it didn't happen for them, and really, I really can't get past how you have Caleb Williams and you do finish 7-5. Like, even with a bad defense, and Lincoln Riley has had some bad defenses, but still at some times, he went to the college football playoff. Like, he went to the college football playoff with Kyler Murray. He went with Jalen Hurts. He also went with Baker Mayfield. And somehow they're not able to get over that hump. So now not only is he able to get over the college football, at least winning a game in the college football playoff, his defenses are atrocious. His offenses are fantastic. They put up a lot of points and they draw a lot of attention, but it really doesn't go past conference championships. Hasn't won one at USC, although it's been a couple of years, and I think some coaches do deserve a couple of years. But knowing how he did Oklahoma fans, he might just do the same with USC, and he might take that Texas A&M job. I could see him very, very likely. I think there's about a 65 to a 70% chance Lincoln Riley takes a Texas A&M job. I mean, who wouldn't? They have a really good. I mean, they had one of the top recruiting classes of all time, highest rated in 2022 or 2022 that they had with Texas A&M. and the NIL collective that they have. But will it be the same? Like, it obviously helps Connor Weigman because we know Lincoln Riley, his offense is really good, develops quarterbacks into Heisman Trophy Award winners, future first overall draft picks, all that sort of deal. And they've had some good success. Murray's had good success. Hurts has had really great success. Mayfield, career backup, maybe borderline starter. Not obviously not the same as Hurts or even Kyler Murray so far. But his ability to develop, and like I said, I could see Lincoln Riley taking that Texas A&M job either by next week or the week after that, once conference championship games wrap up and we get into that portal era, which is absolutely, once again, going to be an absolute hectic chaos. Now, taking it a level up in terms of talking about head coaching or a potential head coach not even leaving, but leaving the team, maybe either that's a firing or just opting out. Taking it a level up, like I said, Washington Commanders. Ron Rivera, they lose to the New York Giants. I mean, how do you lose to the New York Giants with a backup quarterback and the makeshift offensive line and all the problems that the New York Giants have? When you're the Commanders, Sam Howell, yeah, he's been up and down, and you have all the pieces that you do. Like, there's obviously my main issue that I would look at in terms of trying to solve for the Washington Commanders is left tackle. I think they need a dominant left tackle to be able to help give some pass protection for Sam Howell. Is it just Ron Rivera to blame? No, I mean, Howell has been up and down, like I've said. I mean, they did trade away two of their best defensive edge rushers, so now half their defensive line is gone, as I was trying to say, and I think this is the perfect time for the Commanders to cut ties with Rivera and move forward with Eric Bieniemy. Like, why not let's just give Eric Bieniemy a chance? I think a lot of other teams who are looking at potential head coaches, maybe that's the Chargers, and then of course maybe the Raiders into that mix. Commanders, obviously themselves, Panthers, Bears, all these teams that are looking for potential head coaching replacements would like to see what Eric Bieniemy would do if he was the head coach. Like, if they were to let Ron Rivera go right now and assign Eric Bieniemy as the interim head coach, why not give him that opportunity? And that's the perfect chance for the rest of the league to see if he is fit to be a head coach. Do I think he's fit to be a head coach? I think so. I mean, of course, that's a prediction, and it can go a various amounts of ways. I'm having confidence in it. But you also don't know, like the whole adage is you don't know unless you try. You absolutely don't know unless you try, and it gives the rest of the league some clarity. In my opinion, yes, absolutely Eric Bieniemy should be given a head coaching spot, and this is the perfect time for the Commanders to do it, and for him to audition for the rest of the NFL, because we've seen his track record and what he's able to do with the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. Now let's give him a chance to be able to do it and say, okay, I can do it outside the shadows of Mahomes and Andy Reid. Now, for my last segment, I told y'all it was going to be a good one, and I'm going to keep to that promise. Because this one player, who a lot of people have given some criticism for, although some of it most likely fair, given the circumstances and the context and the situation, just might be the MVP, and you might want to place your bet on it right now. And that is 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy. Listen, Brock Purdy, during that time when a lot of his key pieces, when they were out, obviously struggled. Was some of it his fault? Yeah. Does he have some struggles? Yeah, because every quarterback does. But you look at the numbers that he has so far this season, a 70% completion percentage with 2,662 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, a 115.1 quarterback rating. In his recent game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 84% completion percentage, 333 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, a perfect passer rating of 158.3. You want to know the only other quarterback in 49ers history to have a perfect passer rating in a game? Is none other than 49ers legend Joe Montana. That's it. Brock Purdy, Joe Montana, the only quarterbacks in 49ers history to have a perfect pass rating in a game. Brock Purdy. And his, like I said, just mentioned with his career seasons or his season stats so far this year. Playing at an elite level, and he's obviously got a lot of games where he can back that up. He's got the game against the Philadelphia Eagles, which we are all going to be watching and looking forward to. He leads this team. He keeps up those stats. And looking at the odds right now, currently sitting at plus 1800. Terrific odds for someone who has the stats and can definitely prove it, especially in that Eagles game. That concludes this podcast. I appreciate every single one of y'all who followed me on social media. Once again, the links to my social media will be in the description. Make sure you like, subscribe, and it's the season of Thanksgiving and giving in general. So share this podcast, share it out to others. I appreciate y'all, those who have shared this podcast, like this video, subscribed. I appreciate every single one of you and my followers on social media. Y'all mean a lot to me. Thank y'all. God bless. God take care of y'all. And until next time, deuces.